All right, today let's talk about the FIRE movement and the math of retirement or early retirement. This was popularized by a movement whose acronym is FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. The math really sort of applies to any kind of retirement, but it's more frequently applied to early retirement. So the first thing is, how much money does one need to retire? In order to figure that out, you need to know how much you expect to spend in retirement. Now, this is already the first point of confusion. There are people who say, okay, here's how much I currently make. How much in assets do I need in order to be able to take that amount? But it's not really about how much you make now. It's about how much you spend now. Because in retirement, the idea is, if you imagine sort of like the path of accumulating and then using money. The idea is that while you're working, you're accumulating assets, and that then when you retire, there's an inflection point and you start using those assets, hopefully slowly enough that they never run out. But the point is, once you get here, you actually don't need to accumulate assets anymore. That's why you can retire. So it's really about how much do you spend right now rather than how much do you earn. So once you figure out the number of dollars you spend per year and need to spend, you basically multiply it by 25, and it tells you how much money you need to retire in sort of more liquid assets. There's different opinions as to whether you include the value of real estate in this. I think it's better not to, and it'll give you better numbers. So let's imagine that right now you spend $50,000 per year. If you multiply that by 25, that gives us $1.25 million, okay? The idea is, with this amount, you could retire, spend 50 grand a year, which will adjust for inflation, and you shouldn't run out of money. This is old hat to a lot of people, but this will be sort of disorienting for folks who haven't thought about this type of math before. So let's figure out how this works. The idea is that this is what you need essentially in stocks and bonds. So we're not including Social Security, pensions, income you might have in retirement. The idea is, if you want to pull 50K from a stock and bond retirement account, you need 1.25 million. This is what is known as the 4% rule. When you multiply by 25, what you're talking about, it implies that you're talking about using 4% each year. And the idea here is as follows. On average, the market makes 7%, and on average, we have 3% inflation. Now, it's not literally a subtraction, but these are just the figures that are typically used. Inflation has been higher recently. There's no doubt about that, and it's being studied now if and how that's going to change this math. But the idea basically is, the 50K would last 25 years if you didn't make anything on the 1.25 million. Right? That without any growth of the capital, you could last 25 years on 50K, then you would end with zero. Okay. If on average the stock market will return this 7%, but you're also going to need to slightly up how much you take because of inflation in order to get $50,000 in purchasing power, then this will work as long as you don't take more than 4%, and you shouldn't run out of money. In fact, oftentimes, in many scenarios, you will end up with just as much as you started. You can take your 4% and still have your 1.25 million at the end of a 30-year period. In fact, there was a study that looked at from 1926 to 2009, if people were in 50% stocks, 50% bonds with a nest egg like this, they found that during that period, right, 1926 to 2009, 100% of scenarios, you did not run out of money. Now, in some scenarios, when the market was worse, you ended up with less money at the end of that period. You started actually eating into the principal. And it found that in 30-year periods, in 96% of scenarios, you did not run out of money. So this is on 25-year and this is on 30-year. So there is a lot of margin for error there. Now, you could be even more conservative. Let's say you are not optimistic about the market returning 7%, or you're not optimistic about getting back to an average of 3% inflation. You could say, well, instead of 4%, Instead, I'm only going to count on 3.5%. Well, that means one of two things. Either you have to expect to spend less than the 50 grand a year, or you need a higher number than 1.25 million. Okay. But it's just a matter of figuring out that math. Now, the image on screen shows the various confidence levels over a 30-year period, depending on your asset allocation. We've talked about asset allocation before. You could be 100% in stocks and have no bonds. You could be 100% in bonds and have no stocks. The idea here is that you have a mix of stocks and bonds, and then you have a withdrawal rate. Maybe you're more conservative and you say 3%. Maybe you're comfortable with the 4%. And this image shows you how confident you can be in 30 years with that level of withdrawal. Now, there are no doubt contrarians to the 4% rule. There are some who say, throughout much of the 20th century, you could have withdrawn 7%. Sorry, my entire thing is going haywire here. You could have actually withdrawn 7% and been fine. There's others who say, really to be confident, you should only be withdrawing 3%. The point is, you can dial this in based on your level of confidence. There are other considerations here, which include, well, what about your Social Security earnings? So let's just, as an example, understand that all of these things have to be thought of individually. But imagine that you say, well, I need $50,000 per year, but I am expecting $2,000 a month from Social Security. Okay, that's $24,000 for the year. Well, that means that from your nest egg, you only need $26,000 per year, right? And at the 4% rule, now you're multiplying that by 25 rather than 50,000. And of course, it's a lot less. It's, around, I don't know, it's got to be around 800,000 or so. All of these considerations change the math, but the basic concept is yearly spend. So yearly spend times 25 equals, some people call it the magic or freedom number. That's the general gist of it. And it's backed by many, many years of back testing, and it works very well.